Joining us is presidential historian Dr. Laura Smith as well. Laura, Jared is saying, and everyone was expecting this, of course, because is there a precedent for a president not standing again for a second term?
This is the fascinating thing about presidential history and announcements for re-election is that there really isn't any pattern. I mean, in the 19th century, early mid-19th century, it was seen, and this is a backdrop to the founding fathers, is quite crude to even campaign. The idea by the 1830s onwards was that your party nominated you and that you were a servant of the people and you very nicely accepted the nomination. So that was the pattern that was set. And of course, now in the modern times, we've seen all kinds of different approaches. There's no secret winning recipe. We've seen Donald Trump obviously do the unprecedented of really declaring with his even paperwork, official paperwork for re-election, really off the bat of his inaugural, which was unprecedented. So we see all kinds of different approaches to whether to decide to run again and actually announcing that re-election.
Tell us about the power of being the incumbent as well and what that can mean.
Well, actually, I think it could work in Joe Biden's favor. We've talked a lot about his age, and that's obviously a question that a lot of people have some concern over. But I think the way that it works as an incumbent is that you have the bully pulpit. That's always been the case, as Theodore Roosevelt coined the term, the president's bully pulpit. You are the focal point for really the world stage as U.S. president. That means that you don't nationwide, all 50 states, you don't need that same capacity because the attention is on spotlight. It's always going to be on you. So really, the Biden campaign could have a very targeted approach of focusing on specific states. And I'm sure they're really going to want to ensure that they get out the vote in states that did not go their way in 2016. So what was previously referred to as Hillary Clinton's blue wall that infamously crumbled. They want to make sure that they get out the vote. I think that's what we really saw with that video today, that his re-election announcement wasn't necessarily there to change minds, but to encourage people and gain momentum of his base to ensure that he gets out the vote, especially in the fact that he relied on African-American support in 2020.
Laura, President Biden has never been one of the greatest communicators within the party. He has a charisma in other ways, though, but a lot is being made and will be made about his age. What are the key things that you think he offers?
Well, I think to put it in one way is that nobody is really necessarily afraid of Joe Biden, is how it was phrased in 2020, was that people were looking for some semblance of normalcy, as President William Harding infamously phrased the term. Normality is what we would say over here. And people were desperate for that in 2020 in the midst of the COVID pandemic. Now we're not looking at necessarily for someone to solve one particular crisis. But we're looking for someone, certainly Democrats are looking for someone who might be able to, certainly as the video portrayed, be able to sort of bring back this semblance of rights. Joe Biden really emphasized this idea of women's rights, protecting gay rights, protecting people's right to vote. All of these things that people are fearing have been encroached upon, particularly by state governments, especially after the Dobbs decision overturning Roe v. Wade. So this is where the Biden campaign, where the Democrats are really going to focus on, is trying to get out the vote and that momentum through that appeal. But you're absolutely right. He is gaffe prone. He does have obviously a history of stuttering, which is why he's so scripted. It works for him. But it does present a very different energy and style to Donald Trump, even though they're of the same generation and age bracket.
And in this time of intense partisanship, Laura, do you think that he remains or still can be a unifying figure?
I think that he was optimistic perhaps in 2020 by presenting in his Battle for the Soul of the Nation this idea of unifying the country. I think that was always quite optimistic and rhetoric induced more than anything else. People look back at Obama, obviously known as a very great communicator in comparison, but obviously look back at the optimism of 2008 versus the reality and the different campaign that he ran in 2012. So I think that obviously he is hardened by experience, and I don't think he's particularly going to, especially as you saw on the video, make appeals or promises that he's going to unify the whole country. but is going to look to bring out perhaps the best of bringing people together in a sense of working to support one another around similar values in terms of traditional American values, freedom, democracy, rights, these sorts of things, in terms of bringing people up for the best of those American values. I think that's going to be the message rather than unifying or changing minds, because when you've been there for 4 years, it's very hard to change people's minds when they have a record to look at.
Laura, thank you. Dr. Laura Smith joining us there. Well, as we've been saying, Mr. Biden will be 81 on voting day in November next year. That makes him the oldest candidate to